Bhagava Arhan Samma Sambuddho.
हाँ दीप्ति चालू तो है यहाँ।
हाँ तो चालू है।
यहाँ तो
अभी शुरू हुआ है ना?
अभी शुरू हुआ है।
देर हो गई थी ना?
पहले नहीं,
देर से चालू किया ना?
थोड़ा देर से चालू हुआ है।
देखो अभी आ रहा है।
देखो आ रहा है।
यहाँ तो सब ठीक है।
यहाँ तो ठीक है। मैसेज कर देना फिर शुरू करते ना, मैसेज कर देना कि आ गया। ठीक है चलो
Bhagava Arhan Samma Sambuddho Sakato Yena Bhagavata Dhammo Supatipanno Yassa Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Tamayam Bhagavantam Sadammang Sasangam Ime Sakare Yatarhannaro Pitehi Abhipujayama Sadhuno Bhante Bhagava Suchira Parinibhutopi Pachima Janatana Kampamanasa
Sakari
Dugata Panakara Bhute Patiganatu Amhakam Divaratam Hitaya Sukhaya
Arhan
Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivade Sakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami
Supatipanno
Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami
Hanmayam Buddhasya Bhagavato Ubbhagnam Karam Karomasi
Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Handmayam buddhanusati nayam karomasi tam kopana
bhagavantang evam kalyano kiti saddo abuggato iti piso bhagava arahan samma sambuddho vidyacharana sampanno sugato lokavidu anuttaro purisada sarati sattadeva nussanang buddho bhagavati.
Handmayam buddha viditim karomasi buddhavara
antavartadi gunabhito yodha vinyana karuna isamagatato bodhesiyo sujanatam kamalang vasuro vandamiham tamarinam sirisa jinendam buddhoyo sabbhapaninam
saranam khemamuttamam
pathamanusatittanang vandami tam sirena buddhasasmidaso buddho me sami kessaro buddhasam niyademi sariran jivitan chedam vandantoham charissami buddhaseva subodhitang natti me saranang anyak buddho me saranang varan etena sajjavajjen vaddeyam sattu sasani buddhang me vandamanena yam punyam pasutam eda sabbepi antarayami mahesum tasya tejasa. बुद्धो पटिकनाथोच कालांतरे समर्थमपते
Handmayam dhammanusati nayam karomasi swakato
भगवता धम्मो संदिट्ठिको अकालिको एहिपासिको औपनयिको पश्चात्त वेदितव्य विज्ञाहीते.
Handmayam dhamma viditim karomasi swakhatadi
गुणयोग वसेन सेयो यो मग्गपाक परियति विमोक भेदो सम्मोकुलोक पतना तददारि दारि वन्दामि हम
taram varada mamitam
धम्मो यो सर्वपाणिना शरणं खेममुत्तमं द्वितीयानुसतिष्ठानं वन्दामि तं शिरेण धम्मस्मि
दासीवा dhammo me sami kissaro
धम्मस्सहं नियादेमि शरीरं जीवितं चिदं वन्दन्तोऽहं चरिष्यामि धम्मस्यैव सुधम्मतं नत्ति मे शरणं अन्यं
dhammo
मे शरणं वरं एतेन सच्चवज्जेन वड्डेयं सत्तु शासनी धम्मं मे वन्दमानेन यं पुण्यं पसुतं यदा सब्बेऽपि अन्तरायामि माहेशुं तस्य तेजसा कायेन वाचा मनसेन्द्रियैर्वा धम्मैककर्मं भक्तमः धम्मो पठिगनाथोच्च कालान्तरे संवरितं धम्मे
आनंदमयं संघानुसतिनयं करोमसि सुपटिपन्नो
भगवतो सावक संघो उजुपटिपन्नो भगवतो सावक संघो सापटिपन्नो
भगवतो सावक संघो
सामीचिपटिपन्नो भगवतो सावक संघो यदिदं चत्तारि पुरुषयुगा अट्टपुरुषपुङ्गला स भगवतो सावक संघो आहुनेयो पाहुनेयो दक्षिणे अंजलिकरणीयो अनुत्तरं पुण्यकृतं लोकस्याति
आनंदमयं संगादिगीतिं करोमसि सधम्मजो सुपटिपति
गुणादियुतो यो अट्टविदो आर्यपुङ्गल संगसेठो शीलादिधम्मपवरा सयकाय चित्तो वन्दाम्यहं तमर्या गणं सुशुद्धं सर्वपाणिनं शरणं केममुत्तमं ततीयानुसतिष्ठान् वन्दामि तं शिरेणहम् तङ्गस्मि दासो वा सङ्गो मे सामि केसरो सङ्गस्सहं नियादेमि शरीरं जीवितं चिदं बन्धन्तोऽहं चरिष्यामि सङ्गस्य उपटिपन्नतं नास्ति मे शरणं अन्यं सङ्गो शरणं वरं एतेन सच्चवज्जेन वड्डेयं सत्तु शासनी सङ्गं मे वन्दमानेन यं पुण्यं पसतं हिता सर्वेऽपि अन्तरायां माहेशुं तस्य तेजसा कायेन वाचा मनसेन्द्रियैर्वा संघैककर्मं भक्तमः संघो पठिगनाथोच्च कालान्तरे संवरितं अब हम धज्जग्ग सूत्र सुनेंगे।
धजग्ग परित्त नमो तस्स भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा सम्बुद्धस्स नमो तस्स भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा सम्बुद्धस्स नमो तस्स भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा सम्बुद्धस्स एवं मे सुतं एकं समयं भगवा सावत्र्यं विहरति जेतवने अनाथपिण्डिकस्य आरामे tatrako bhagava bhikkhu amantesi bhikkhavoti badante titte bhikkhu bhagavato paccasosum bhagava etadvoca bhuta pubbang bhikkhave devasura sangamo samupabbulho ahosi athako bhikkhave sakko devanamindo deve tavatinse amantesi sache marisa devanang sangamagatanang uppajjeya bhayang va chambitattang va lomahanso va mameva tasmin samaye dhajaggang ullokeyatha mamang hivo dhajaggang ullokayatang yang bhavishyati bhayang va chambitattang va lomahanso va so pahi isati noche me dhajaggang ullokeyat ath pajapatis devarajas dhajaggang ullokeyat pajapatis hivo devarajas dhajaggang ullokayatang yang bhavishyati bhayang va chambitattang va lomahanso va so pahi isati noche pajapatis devarajas dhajaggang ullokeyat ath varunas devarajas dhajaggang ullokeyat varunas hivo devarajas dhajaggang ullokayatang yang bhavishyati bhayang va chambitattang va lomahanso va so pahi isati noche varunas devarajas dhajaggang ullokeyat ath isanas devarajas dhajaggang ullokeyat isanas hivo devarajas dhajaggang ullokayatang yang bhavishyati bhayang va chambitattang va lomahanso va so pahi isati tangkopana bhikkhave sakkasva devanamindas dhajaggang ullokayatang pajapatisva devarajas dhajaggang ullokayatang varunasva devarajas dhajaggang ullokayatang ඊශානස්සවා දේවරාජස්ස ධජග්ගං උල්ලෝකයතං යං භවිස්සති භයං වා චම්බිතත්තං වා ලෝමහංසෝ වා සෝ පහියේථාපි නෝපි පහියේත තං කිස්ස හේතු සක්කෝ භික්ඛවේ දේවානමින්දෝ අවීත රාගෝ අවීත දෝසෝ අවීත මෝහෝ භීරුච්ඡම්භි උත්‍රාසි පලායිති අහංච කෝ භික්ඛවේ එවං වදාමි සචේතුම්හාකං භික්ඛවේ අරඤ්ඤගතානං වා රුක්ඛමූලගතානං වා ශුඤ්ඤාගාරගතානං වා උපජ්ජේය භයං වා චම්බිතත්තං වා ලෝමහංසෝ වා මමේව තස්මින් සමයේ අනුස්සරියාත ඉතිපිසෝ භගවා අරහං සම්මා සම්බුද්ධෝ විද්‍යාචරණ සම්පන්නෝ සුගතෝ ලෝකවිදු අනුත්තරෝ පුරිස ධම්මසාරථි සත්තා දේව මනුස්සානං බුද්ධෝ භගවාති මමං හිවෝ භික්ඛවේ අනුස්සරතං යං භවිස්සති භයං වා චම්බිතත්තං වා ලෝමහංසෝ වා සෝ පහිස්සති නොචේ මං අනුස්සරියාත අත ධම්මං අනුස්සරියාත ස්වාක්ඛාතෝ භගවතා ධම්මෝ සම්දිට්ඨිකෝ අකාලිකෝ ඒහිපස්සිකෝ ඕපනයිකෝ පච්චත්තං වේදිතබ්බෝ විඤ්ඤෝහීති ධම්මං හි වෝ භික්ඛවේ අනුස්සරතං යං භවිස්සති භයං වා චම්බිතත්තං වා ලෝමහංසෝ වා සෝ පහිස්සති නොචේ ධම්මං අනුස්සරේයාත අත සංඝං අනුස්සරියාත සුපටිපන්නෝ භගවතෝ ශාවක සංඝෝ උජුපටිපන්නෝ භගවතෝ ශාවක සංඝෝ ඥායපටිපන්නෝ භගවතෝ ශාවක සංඝෝ සාමීපටිපන්නෝ භගවතෝ ශාවක සංඝෝ යදිදං චත්තාරි පුරිස යුගානි අට්ඨ පුරිස පුග්ගලා ඒස භගවතෝ ශාවක සංඝෝ ආහුනේයෝ දක්ඛිනේයෝ අංජලි කරණීයෝ අනුත්තරං පුඤ්ඤක්ඛෙත්තං ලෝකස්සාති සංඝං හියෝ භික්ඛවේ අනුස්සරතං යං භවිස්සති භයං වා චම්බිතත්තං වා ලෝමහංසෝ වා සෝපහි ඉස්සති තං කිස්ස හේතු තථාගතෝ භික්ඛවේ අරහං සම්මා සම්බුද්ධෝ විතරාගෝ විතදෝසෝ විතමෝහෝ අභීරු අච්ඡම්භි අනුත්‍රාසි අපලායිති ඉදමවෝච භගවා ඉදං වත්වා සුගතෝ අථා පරං ඒතදවෝච සත්තා අරඤ්ඤේ රුක්ඛ මූලේවා ශුඤ්ඤාගාරේව භික්ඛවෝ අනුස්සරේත සම්බුද්ධං භයං තුම්මාක නොසියා නොචේ බුද්ධං සරයාත ලෝකජිට්ඨං නරාසභං අත ධම්මං සරයාත නීයානිකං සුදේශිතං නොචේ ධම්මං සරයාත නීයානිකං සුදේශිතං අත සංඝං සරයාත පුඤ්ඤක්ඛෙත්තං අනුත්තරං එවං බුද්ධං සරන්තානං ධම්මං සංඝං ච භික්ඛවෝ භයං වා චම්බිතත්තං වා ලෝමහංසෝ නහෙසති තී ඒතේන සච්ච වජ්ජේන සොත්ථිතේ හෝතු සම්බදා ඒතේන සච්ච වජ්ජේන සොත්ථිතේ හෝතු සම්බදා ඒතේන සච්ච වජ්ජේන සොත්ථිතේ හෝතු සම්බදා.
Now listen to a Desana by Ajahn Chah, Clarity of Insight. It is rather long, so we listen to half today and half tomorrow.
This is the 36th talk in this collection, and it's entitled Clarity of Insight. And this was first published in its own little booklet called Clarity of Insight, understandably. And it's a talk given to a group of lay meditators in Bangkok in April of 1979. Clarity of Insight. Meditate reciting Buddho, Buddho, until it penetrates deep into the heart of your consciousness, your citta. The word Buddho represents the awareness and wisdom of the Buddha. In practice, you must depend on this word more than anything else. The awareness it brings will lead you to understand the truth about your own mind. It's a true refuge, which means that there is both mindfulness and insight present. Wild animals can have an awareness of a sort. They have mindfulness as they stalk their prey and prepare to attack. Even the predator needs firm mindfulness to keep hold of the captured prey, however defiantly it struggles to escape death. That is one kind of mindfulness. For this reason, you must be able to distinguish between the different kinds of mindfulness. The Buddha taught to meditate reciting Buddho as a way to apply the mind. When you consciously apply the mind to an object, it wakes up. The awareness wakes it up. Once this knowing has arisen through meditation, you can see the mind clearly. As long as the mind remains without the awareness of Buddho, even if there is ordinary worldly mindfulness present, the mind is unawakened and without insight. It will not lead you to what is truly beneficial. Sati, or mindfulness, depends on the presence of Buddho, the knowing. It must be a clear knowing, which leads to the mind becoming brighter and more radiant. The illuminating effect that this clear knowing has on the mind is similar to the brightening of a light in a darkened room. As long as the room is pitch black, any objects placed inside remain difficult to distinguish or else completely obscured from view because of the lack of light. As you begin intensifying the brightness of the light inside, it will penetrate throughout the whole room, enabling you to see more clearly from moment to moment, thus allowing you to know more and more the details of any object that's inside there. You could also compare training the mind with teaching of a child. It would be impossible to force a child who hasn't still learned to speak to accumulate knowledge at an unnaturally fast rate that is beyond their capacity. You can't get too tough with them or try teaching them more language than they can take in at any one time, because the children would simply be unable to hold their attention long enough on what you were saying. Your mind is similar. Sometimes it's appropriate to give yourself some praise and encouragement. Sometimes it's more appropriate to be critical. It's like with children. If you scold them too often and are too intense in the way that you deal with them, they won't progress in the right way, even though they might be determined to do well. If you force them too much, the child will be adversely affected, because they'll still lack knowledge and experience as a result, and naturally lose track of the right way to go. If you do that with your own mind, it isn't samma patipada, or the way of practice that leads to enlightenment. Patipada, or practice, refers to the training and guidance of body, speech and mind. Here, I'm specifically referring to the training of the mind. The Buddha taught that training the mind involves knowing how to teach yourself and go against the grain of your desires. You have to use different skillful means to teach your mind because it constantly gets caught into moods and depression and elation. It gets caught into moods of depression and elation. This is the nature of the unenlightened mind. It's just like a child. The parents of a child who hasn't learned to speak are in a position to teach it because they know how to speak, and their knowledge of language is the greater. The parents are constantly in a position to see where their child is lacking in its understanding because they know more. Training the mind is like this. When you have the awareness of Buddho, the mind is wiser and has a more refined level of knowing than normal. This awareness allows you to see the conditions of the mind and to see the mind itself. You can see the state of mind in the midst of all phenomena. This being so, you're naturally able to employ skillful techniques for training the mind. Whether you're caught into doubt or any of the other defilements, you see it as a mental phenomenon that arises in the mind and must be investigated and dealt with in the mind. That awareness which we call Buddho is like the parents of the child. The parents are the child's teachers in charge of its training, so it's quite natural that whenever they allow it to wander freely, simultaneously they must keep one eye on it, aware of what it's doing and where it's running to or crawling to. Sometimes you can be too clever and have too many good ideas. In the case of teaching children, you might think so much about what is best for them that you could reach the point where more methods you think up for teaching them, the further away they move from the goals that you want them to achieve. The more you try and teach them, the more distant they become, until they actually start to go astray and fail to develop in the proper way. In training the mind, it's crucial to overcome skeptical doubt. Doubt and uncertainty are powerful obstacles that must be dealt with. Investigation of the three fetters of personality view, sakkaya ditthi, blind attachment to rules and practices, silappata paramasa, and skeptical doubt, vicikicca, is the way out of attachment practiced by the noble ones, the Arya Pugala. But at first you just understand these defilements from the books. You still lack insight into how things truly are. Investigating personality view is the way to go beyond the delusion that identifies the body as a self. This includes attachment to your own body as a self, or attaching to other people's bodies as solid selves. Sakkaya ditthi, or personality view, refers to this thing you call yourself. It means attachment to the view that the body is a self. You must investigate this view until you gain a new understanding and can see the truth that attachment to the body is defilement, and it obstructs the minds of all human beings from gaining insight into the Dhamma. For this reason, before anything else, the preceptor will instruct each new candidate for bhikkhu ordination to investigate the 5 meditation objects: hair of the head, kesa; hair of the body, loma; nails, nakha; teeth, dandha; and skin, tacho. It's through the contemplation and investigation that you develop insight into personality view. These objects form the most immediate basis for the attachment that creates the delusion of personality view. Contemplating them leads to the direct examination of personality view and provides the means by which each generation of men and women who take up the instructions of the preceptor upon entering the community can actually transcend personality view. But in the beginning you remain deluded, without insight, and hence are unable to penetrate personality view and see the truth of the way things are. You fail to see the truth because you still have a firm and unyielding attachment. It's this attachment that sustains the delusion. The Buddha taught to transcend delusion. The way to transcend it is through clearly seeing the body for what it is. With penetrating insight, you must see that the true nature of both your own body and other people's is essentially the same. There's no fundamental difference between people's bodies. The body is just a body. It's not a being, a self, yours or theirs. This clear insight into the true nature of the body is called kayanupassana. A body exists. You label it and give it a name. Then you attach and cling to it with the view that it is your body, or his or her body. You attach to the view that the body is permanent, and that it's something clean and pleasant. This attachment goes deep into the mind. This is the way that the mind clings to the body. Personality view means that you're still caught in doubt and uncertainty about the body. Your insight hasn't fully penetrated the delusion that sees the body as a self. As long as the delusion remains, you call the body a self, or atta, and interpret your entire experience from this viewpoint, that there's a solid, enduring entity which you call the self. You're so completely attached to the conventional way of viewing the body as a self that there's no apparent way of seeing beyond it. But clear understanding according to the truth of the way things are means that you see the body as just that much. The body is just the body. With insight you see the body as just that much, and this wisdom counteracts the delusion of the sense of self. This insight that sees the body as just that much leads to the destruction of attachment, upadana, through the gradual uprooting and letting go of delusion. Practice contemplating the body as being just that much, until it's quite natural to think to yourself, oh, the body is merely the body. It's just that much. Once this way of reflection is established, as soon as you say to yourself, it's just that much, the mind lets go. There's letting go of attachment to the body. There is the insight that sees the body as merely the body. By sustaining the sense of detachment through the continuous seeing of the body as merely the body, all doubt and uncertainty are gradually uprooted. As you investigate the body, the more clearly you see it as just the body, rather than a person, a being, a me or a them, the more powerful the effect on the mind, resulting in the simultaneous removal of doubt and uncertainty. Blind attachment to rules and practices, silappata paramasa, which manifests in the mind as blindly fumbling and feeling around through a lack of clarity as to the real purpose of practice, is abandoned simultaneously because it arises in conjunction with personality view. You can say that the three fetters of doubt, blind attachment to rites and practices, and personality view are inseparable and even similes for each other. Once you've seen this relationship clearly, when one of the three fetters, such as doubt for instance, it arises and you're able to let it go through the cultivation of insight, the other two fetters are automatically abandoned at the same time. They're extinguished together. Simultaneously, you let go of personality view and the blind attachment that's causing a fumbling and fuzziness of intention over different practices. You see them as each one part of your overall attachment to the sense of self, which is to be abandoned. You must repeatedly investigate the body and break it down into its component parts. As you see each part as it truly is, the perception of the body being a solid entity or self is gradually eroded away. You have to keep putting continuous effort into this investigation of the truth and can't let up. A further aspect of mental development that leads to clearer and deeper insight is meditating on an object to calm the mind down. The calm mind is the mind that is firm and stable in samadhi. This can be khanika samadhi, momentary concentration, upachara samadhi, neighborhood concentration, or appana samadhi, absorption. The level of concentration is determined by the refinement of consciousness from moment to moment as you train the mind to maintain awareness on a meditation object. In khanika samadhi, momentary concentration, the mind unifies for just a short space of time. It calms down in samadhi, but having gathered together momentarily, immediately withdraws from that peaceful state. As concentration becomes more refined in the course of meditation, many similar characteristics of the tranquil mind are experienced at each level. So, each one is described as a level of samadhi, whether it's khanika, upachara, or appana. At each level, the mind is calm, but the depth of the samadhi varies, and the nature of the peaceful mental state experienced differs. On one level, the mind is still subject to movement and can wander, but moves around within the confines of the concentrated state. It doesn't get caught in activity that leads to agitation and distraction. Your awareness might follow a wholesome mental object for a while, before returning to settle down at a point of stillness where it remains for a period. You could compare the experience of khanika samadhi with a physical activity like taking a walk somewhere. You might walk for a period before stopping for a rest, and, having rested, start walking again until it's time to stop for another rest. Even though you interrupt the journey periodically to stop walking and take rests, each time remaining completely still, it's only ever a temporary stillness of the body. After a short space of time, you have to start moving again to continue the journey. This is what happens within the mind as it experiences such a level of concentration. If you practice meditation focusing on an object to calm the mind and reach a level of calm where the mind is firmly in samadhi, but there is still some mental movement occurring, that's known as upachara samadhi. In upachara samadhi, the mind can still move around. This movement takes place within certain limits. The mind doesn't move beyond them. The boundaries within which the mind can move are determined by the firmness and stability of concentration. The experience is as if you alternate between a state of calm and a certain amount of mental activity. The mind is calm for some of the time and active for the rest. Within that activity, there is a certain level of calm and concentration that persists, but the mind is not completely still or immovable. It's still thinking a little and wandering about. It's like you're wandering around inside your own home. You wander around within the limits of your concentration. Without losing awareness and moving outdoors away from the meditation object, the movement of the mind stays within the bounds of the wholesome, kusala, wholesome mental states. It doesn't get caught into any mental proliferation based on unwholesome or akusala mental states. Any thinking remains wholesome. Once the mind is calm, it necessarily experiences wholesome mental states from moment to moment. During the time it's concentrated, the mind only experiences wholesome mental states and periodically settles down to become completely still and one-pointed on its object. So, the mind still experiences some movement, circling around its object. It can still wander. It might wander around within the confines set by the level of concentration, but no real harm arises from this movement because the mind is calm in samadhi. This is how the development of the mind proceeds in the course of practice. In Appana Samadhi, the mind calms down and is stilled to a level where it is at its most subtle and skillful. Even if you experience sense impingement from the outside, such as sounds and physical sensations, it remains external and is unable to disturb the mind. You might hear a sound, but it won't distract your concentration. There is the hearing of the sound, but the experience is as if you don't hear anything. There is awareness of the impingement, but it's as if you're not aware. This is because you let go. The mind lets go automatically. Concentration is so deep and firm that you let go of attachment to sense impingement quite naturally. The mind can absorb into this state for long periods. Having stayed inside for an appropriate amount of time, it then withdraws. Sometimes, as you withdraw from such a deep level of concentration, a mental image of some aspect of your own body can appear. It might be a mental image displaying an aspect of the unattractive nature of your body that arises into consciousness. As the mind withdraws from the refined state, the image of the body appears to emerge and expand from within the mind. Any aspect of the body could come up as a mental image and fill up the mind's eye at that point. Images that come up in this way are extremely clear and unmistakable. You have to have genuinely experienced very deep tranquility for them to arise. You see them absolutely clearly, even though your eyes are closed. If you open your eyes, you can't see them, but with eyes shut and the mind absorbed in samadhi, you can see such images as clearly as if viewing the object with your eyes wide open. You can even experience a whole train of consciousness, where from moment to moment the mind's awareness is fixed on images expressing the unattractive nature of the body. The appearance of such images in a calm mind can become the basis for insight into the impermanent nature of the body, as well as into its unattractive, unclean and unpleasant nature, or into the complete lack of any real self or essence within it. When these kinds of special knowledge arise, they provide the basis for skillful investigation and the development of insight. You bring this kind of insight right inside your own heart. As you do this more and more, it becomes the cause for insight knowledge to arise by itself. Sometimes when you turn your attention to reflecting on the subject of asubha, or unattractiveness of the body, images of different unattractive aspects of the body can manifest in the mind automatically. These images are clearer than any you could try to summon up with your imagination, and lead to insight of a far more penetrating nature than that gained through the ordinary kind of discursive thinking. This kind of clear insight has such a striking impact that the activity of the mind is brought to a stop, followed by the experience of a deep sense of dispassion. The reason it's so clear and piercing is that it originates from a completely peaceful mind. Investigating from within a state of calm leads you to clearer and clearer insight, the mind becoming more peaceful as it is increasingly absorbed in the contemplation. The clearer and more conclusive the insight, the deeper inside the mind penetrates with its investigation, constantly supported by the calm of samadhi. This is what the practice of kammatthana involves. Continuous investigation in this way helps you to repeatedly let go of and ultimately destroy attachment to personality view. It brings an end to all remaining doubt and uncertainty about this heap of flesh we call the body, and the letting go of blind attachment to rules and practices. Even in the event of serious illness, tropical fevers or different health problems that normally have a strong physical impact and shake the body up, if samadhi and insight remains firm and imperturbable, your understanding and insight allows you to make a clear distinction between mind and body. The mind is one phenomenon, the body another. Once you see body and mind as completely and indisputably separate from each other, it means that the practice of insight has brought you to the point where your mind sees for certain the true nature of the body. Seeing the way the body truly is, clearly and beyond doubt from within the calm of samadhi, leads to the mind experiencing a strong sense of weariness and turning away, nibbida. This turning away comes from the sense of disenchantment and dispassion that arises as the natural result of seeing the way things are. It's not a turning away that comes from ordinary worldly moods, such as fear, revulsion, or other unwholesome qualities like envy or aversion. It's not coming from the same root of attachment as those defiled mental states. This is the turning away that has a spiritual quality to it and has a different effect on the mind from that of the normal moods of boredom and weariness experienced by ordinary unenlightened human beings, putujanas. Usually, when ordinary unenlightened human beings are weary and fed up, they get caught into moods of aversion, rejection, and seeking to avoid. The experience of insight is not the same. The sense of world weariness that grows with insight, however, leads to detachment, turning away, and aloofness that comes naturally from investigating and seeing the truth of the way things are. It's free from attachment to a sense of self that attempts to control and force things to go according to its desires. Rather, you let go with an acceptance of the way things are. The clarity of insight is so strong that you no longer experience any sense of a self that has to struggle against the flow of its desires or endure through attachment. The three fetters of personality view, doubt, and blind attachment to rules and practices that are normally present underlying the way you view the world can't delude you or cause you to make any serious mistakes in practice. This is the very beginning of the path, the first clear insight into ultimate truth, and paves the way for further insight. You could describe it as penetrating the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths are things to be realized through insight. Every monk and nun who's ever realized them has experienced such insight into the truth of the way things are. You know suffering, you know the cause of suffering, you know the cessation of suffering, and you know the path leading to the cessation of suffering. Understanding of each noble truth emerges at the same place within the mind. They come together and harmonize as the factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, and the Buddha taught that they are to be realized within the mind. As the path factors converge in the center of the mind, they cut through any doubts and uncertainty you still have concerning the way of practice. During the course of practicing, it's normal that you experience the different conditions of the mind. You constantly experience desires to do this and that, or go to different places, as well as the different moods of mental pain, frustration, or else indulgence in pleasure-seeking. All of these are just the fruits of past karma. All this resultant karma swells up inside the mind and puffs it out. However, it is the product of past actions. Knowing that it is all stuff coming up from the past, you don't allow yourself to make anything new or extra out of it. You observe and reflect on the arising and cessation of conditions. That which has not yet arisen is still unarisen. This word arise refers to upadana, or the mind's firm attachment and clinging. Over time your mind has been exposed and conditioned by craving and defilement, and the mental conditions and characteristics you experience reflect that. Having developed insight, your mind no longer follows those old habit patterns that were fashioned by defilement. A separation occurs between the mind and those defiled ways of thinking and reacting. The mind separates from the defilements. You can compare this with the effect of putting oil and water together in a bottle. Each liquid has a very different density, so that it doesn't matter whether you keep them in the same bottle or in separate ones, because the difference in their density prevents the liquids from mixing together or permeating into each other. The oil doesn't mix with the water and vice versa. They remain in separate parts of the bottle. You can compare the bottle with the world, and these two different liquids in the bottle that have been put there and forced to stay within its confines are similar to you living in the world with insight that separates your mind from the defilements. You can say that you're living in the world and following the conventions of the world